Hey everyone, Anders here with another Black Desert video. Today we're going to go over the new Boss Rush mode in the Land of the Morning Light expansion that released today. Officially, this new mode is called Black Shrine or Boss Blitz. We'll go over how does this mode work, which classes perform the best in Black Shrine because there is a difference, and what kind of rewards you can expect every week from this new mode. As with all my videos, I have everything broken down into chapters so you can skip around to what you're most interested in. Let's start with how Black Shrine works. From the release of the Land of the Morning Light, you will be able to unlock 9 different bosses. Each one has to be unlocked through its own story. You will fight the boss once as a tutorial to give you an idea of what the fight will look like, but then you will be able to access these bosses through your Black Shrine or Boss Blitz UI. The window will tell you all the bosses available to you, what difficulties you have completed on that class, and what your best times are for each difficulty. Even shows you how many clears you have left for that week, which is very important. Through here, we can also compare our clear times to those of other players on the same difficulty and the same class. The faster you clear, the higher your ranking. The higher your ranking, the more rewards you get every week. In the Boss Rush UI, we also see we have 10 difficulty levels called Calamity levels. At launch, we have Calamity levels 1 through 5 unlocked. In Korea, we are up to Calamity level 7. The higher the level, the more difficult the fight. Almost 3 months since the release of the Land of the Morning Light in Korea, and very few people have actually cleared Calamity level 7. That's because every time you increase the Calamity level of that fight, your damage taken increases, but also more mechanics are introduced and negating damage becomes all the more important. You can't simply build more gear or get more gear to overpower a fight. Your actual gear only contributes 10% of the AP and DP stats to these new boss fights. The other 90% come from your aura power. Aura is fortified with light orbs. These are new items that can be obtained by completing the main story and future side quests. All of these light orb quests can only be done once per account, but some are locked behind difficulty clears. For example, to unlock 2 more light orbs, a quest was added that rewarded you with 1 light orb each for completing Calamity levels 4 and 5. With the majority of stats being locked behind this new aura system, it allows new players to experience this new mode without having to invest time into progressing their own gear. With that said, veterans do still gain an advantage from substats like HP, accuracy, and stamina gained from your adventure journal. These will give you an ever so slight advantage, not a lot, but enough that I think will be better for your clear times. What will give you more of a significant advantage, however, will be in how many consumables you can get from the central market. Elixirs that increase damage modifiers like back attack and crit, food like the exquisite cron meals, perfumes like the deep sea elixir, and your class add-ons will all actually contribute to the damage you deal to the bosses and the damage you mitigate from them. Add-ons in particular will only be partially effective depending on the ones you take. You only really need to think about maximizing your elixir and food combinations once you reach Calamity levels 4 and 5, where some boss fights begin to introduce DPS check mechanics. It's important to note a couple of things about these boss fights. HP and mana potions will not work. You recover HP through green health orbs that spawn around the arena. Instead, you have to clear them to get health back. The larger the orb, the larger the health regeneration. For mana, you regenerate at an increased rate naturally, so not really a lot to think about there. If you do die from a boss or an ad, you will fail and have to start over, but you will not lose any crystals or any XP at any time. If you realize that your run is screwed or you messed up for a fast clear time, you can just simply escape and quit the fight right then and there. There are a total of 9 bosses on global release, each with an elemental affinity and each with their own mechanics. A 10th boss, Imogi, is planned to release a few weeks after the launch of Land of the Morning Light. There are 3 types of elements for bosses: fire, moon, and earth. Each boss will be weak to the same element as their affinity, so if you want to fight the Golden Pig King, he is of a fire affinity, which means you want to invest your aura stats into the fire element. That said, you may find it easier to fight certain bosses over others. This is because some bosses in the Land of the Morning Light have been designed to cater more to melee focused classes, and some others have been designed for range classes. Golden Pig King is a great example. Range characters don't do well here because one of his boss mechanics is an aura that surrounds the boss. If you stay outside his aura too long, he will fully heal himself, forcing you to remain in melee and mid-range to deal damage and avoid his massive AoEs. With 26 classes in the game, Believe it or not, the clear speed for most of these boss encounters is fairly even between all classes, but there are still some that excel at certain boss fights over others. Let's take a brief look at this table of clear times. This shows you the top ranked clear time for each class on each boss on Calamity level 5 difficulty on the Korean server. This looks confusing, I know, so let me try and break it down for you. Blue times show Succession classes hit that number 1 ranked time. Red times are for the Awakening spec of that same class. Succession and Awakening specs both compete with one another in the same ranking class category. So you'll see for some classes, Succession is heavily favored over Awakening as being the better version of that class to do this particular boss in. Succession Wusa is a good example of this, but this table doesn't really show us which classes excel in boss fights at a glance. I know it is confusing, so I went ahead and created these graphs to better visualize class performance on a boss by boss level. These graphs show the same information as our table. Darker bars show it was a Succession class, lighter bars show the top clear time was an Awakening spec. For this particular boss, Corsair didn't even manage to set a clear time, but we'll talk more about why that may be in a minute. We can see most classes perform around the same, with Succession Hashashin being an outlier for being especially good in this fight, and Awakening Sage, Awakening Draconia, Awakening Mystic, and Awakening Valkyrie being around 50% slower than the rest of the classes. Remember, when looking at this graph, less is better. We want faster clear times. If we move on to the next boss, Crow, this is not actually his name. This is a hidden boss. That is a spoiler if I give you his real name, so for now we're just going to call him Crow. Things look a little bit different. We can clearly see some classes perform better than others with this fight, with Corsair performing the worst. The difference between Crow and the Golden Pig King boss is in mechanics. Crow only shows up for a brief moment where you can burst him down. The rest of the time you're dealing with ads and objectives you need to clear, AoE you need to avoid, a lot more mechanics to deal with compared to Golden Pig King, who is just a more straightforward fight where you only have to deal with his attacks, no ads, no outside AoE. Changui, the third of the Fire Affinity bosses, shows some class parity, but Shy pulls ahead with an incredibly low time for this fight. Changui is a boss fight similar to that of a sort of PvP duel. There are ads you need to take care of, but some phases can be skipped if you meet DPS checks where Changui is standing still. Shy is able to shred in this type of fight because of her abilities and can easily skip phases. Mudang Wraith, the first of the Moon Affinity bosses, shows us how even classes are in some fights. Only Valkyrie and Archer seems to struggle here. Personally speaking, in this fight, it's all about predicting where the boss will teleport to and sidestepping her summons. Most classes should perform well here after you learn the boss telegraphs, so not really a difficult fight, more of a beginner-friendly boss fight. Seongak-Chi, another Moon Affinity boss, is a little tricky. She has massive AoE around her and is able to teleport with damage immunity, so classes where you can burst on demand will do better than others, but you'll need mobility to mitigate damage as well. Archer doing so poorly here is more down to the inherent low defenses by that class, but in Korea, there's also very few archers that exist, so some of these longer times can be attributed to a lack of players for those classes. Remember though, despite that, even with the archer time being so long in comparison to the other classes, these are rank 1 times. They are all getting the same reward, so it doesn't matter if you clear the fight in 4 minutes and the rest do it in half the time. In your class, you rank 1, so you'll still get the top reward for the week, which is thankfully one of the better traits of this ranking system. Bamboo Legion is the last of the Moon Affinity bosses and frankly, the easiest boss to clear for the higher Calamity levels. This fight is really many boss fights combined into one. The hardest part about it will be learning the route to take through the map to shave time off the encounter. Every class should do well here. Now we get on to the Earth Affinity bosses. Sangoon is a fight that throws a lot of CC at you. Some even go through super armor. His AoE is massive and you will need to do some line of sight mechanics to avoid his one-shot skills. The time he has to take damage is also very short, so bursty classes with good mobility will do well here. Some classes like Awakening Witch and Wizard also do well here because of their spammable iframe dodge. It is an iframe in PvE every time you use it, so you can simply dodge through mechanics while staying close to the boss and skipping the need to be mobile. This only works with good ping to the servers and with classes that have quick sidestepping iframes. Gumiho is probably the hardest and easiest fight depending on what phases you encounter with this boss. For this fight, you need to utilize 3 potions you get through the main story. Every time Gumiho uses one of their 3 abilities, you need to counter it by using the correct potion. For example, if Gumiho splits into many forms, you use the potion to counter it and it will revert back into a single form. Otherwise, you will need to go through every phase and in some cases be unable to interrupt some high damaging abilities, and that's why times for Gumiho tend to be all over the place. Succession Nova for this one, having such a crazy clear time means that player interrupted perfectly and didn't get any unskippable phases. Having a good burst at the right moments where Gumiho is targetable is key in this fight. Finally, we have Dokshuni, the king of the Dokubi. This fight is all about burst. You will have 3, maybe 4 chances to burst him down, but he will summon flames that will make parts of the ground burn permanently with medium damage over time effects. You can take out the flames that spawn before they summon the AoE circles, but it's better to just focus on burst damage. He will have 2 phases that require you to kill the correct ad, otherwise he will heal, and most of the time when these phases start, he will be immune until the animation ends, so timing your burst is important for clear speed. Most of the classes do well here, but the slower burst classes can struggle. He used to be the hardest boss in the game until recently where they nerfed him to be more manageable. He used to easily be able to just one-shot you through any of his mechanics and any of his attacks, not just his ultimate. Like I said earlier, we will also be getting a new boss called Imogi. We don't know when that's coming. It should be a few weeks until that releases, but we don't really have any more information on what type of boss he will be. So we've broken down the 9 bosses. We've seen how each class does in terms of clear times for rank 1. We've seen some classes are favoring Succession over the Awakening spec for this type of content. How do I personally rank them seeing this data in my own experience doing these boss fights for the past couple of months? Here is my official, unofficial Boss Blitz Black Shrine tier list. If you want to play a class for this mode that will clear everything fast and let you progress through the higher calamity levels faster than the rest, well, Shy, Awakening Ranger, Succession Berserker, Succession Megu, or Succession Wusa are the best classes to do that. Succession Hash has good damage and mobility, is also a good choice. Awakening Sorceress, again, has good damage and mitigation. Succession Nova has good damage and mitigation. And Succession Mewa has good burst damage. Those will be the second best choices in my opinion, taking into account what the fights entail and the Korean clear times on Calamity level 5. Anything lower, honestly, it doesn't matter much. The rest of the classes are pretty similar in terms of clear speed. In terms of specs, Awakening or Succession. For Warriors, I saw a mix of Succession and Awakening Warriors for the best clear times in the top 15, very close in times. Guardians mostly saw Succession variants. Draconia was mostly Awakening. Lan was a good mix of both Awakening and Succession in the top 15. Tamer was mostly Succession. Striker was mostly Awakening. Musa was a good mix of Awakening and Succession. Ninja was mostly Succession variants. Witch and Wizard only Awakening spec. Sage was mostly Awakening. Corsair was a mix of both, but frankly, very few Corsair players here in Korea. Mystic was mostly Awakening. Valkyrie was only Awakening. Kunoichi was mostly Succession. Dark Knight was a good mix of Awakening and Succession in the top 15, and Archer was obviously there, but very few players again using that class in Korea. Now that we know which classes do well in this new mode, let's talk about rewards. Every Sunday at midnight, the rankings for this new mode will reset and rewards will be given out depending on where you ranked. You can check your rankings through the main menu, and you can check your overall class rank through that ranking menu. This will let you know where you place in the tier rewards at the end of the week. The top 1% of clear times will get a rank 1 bundle. The difference between which bundles you get really only comes down to 2 things. What calamity level of the boss have you cleared, and what rank time have you set for the week? The higher the rank, the more items you get. The higher the calamity levels, the higher chance for rare drops. For example, some things only drop if you've done calamity level 4 and above. Your times are saved per class but will be reset every week, but you can still see your best time for that boss and that difficulty. You only get 5 clears per account every week. You can do calamity levels 1 through 5 on one boss in your first week, or calamity level 1, the easiest difficulty, on 5 bosses. Either way, you're limited to just 5 clears per week. You can retry your cleared bosses as many times as you want that week to try and get a better time, but you won't be able to practice new difficulties for that same boss or attempt other bosses you haven't already cleared that week. If you want to complete the new Black Shrine Adventure Journal, which gives you some accuracy stats and maximize your rewards as well, you want to do Bamboo Legion Calamity levels 1 through 5 your first week. This will give you the Adventure Journal stats, and you will also complete the first time clear Adventure Journal for Bamboo Legion. These will reward you with rank 1 bundles for your first clears on bosses. That means double the rewards for the first 10 weeks of clear clears. If you're focused on maximizing your chances for Deboraka Earring or Deboraka Earring parts, you're gonna have to clear Calamity level 4 and 5 only every week. Preferably 5, but that will be difficult unless you play on an S+ tier class and take the time to learn the fight. Normal players should take about half an hour to get their 5 clears done if they only want the bare minimum rewards. If you do go this route, this is what you can expect in terms of rewards: about 1 billion silver, optimistically extra income every week for the first 10 weeks or so. If you focus down Calamity level 4 and 5 bosses every week, rewards will be greatly enhanced, but again, it will still be RNG for the big money items. You are guaranteed to get traces, lightstones, memory fragments, blackstones, and Hungic embers from every bundle. The amount depends on the rank and difficulty of your clear. If you manage to get 500 Hungic embers and no longer need them for your Dawn's Gloves best in slot item, craft that flame and sell it as soon as possible. Hungic flame prices will crash faster than you think. For more on Dawn's Glove crafting, you can check my guide on my channel to see what it's all about. There are no other ways to obtain some of the new Land of the Morning Light items like the legendary crystals, Deboraka earrings, and new damage crystals unless you clear boss rush every week. You can try and buy them on the market, but it is highly unlikely you will see especially Deboraka earrings sold to the central market, at least in the first few months of the expansion. Crystals have now stabilized in Korean servers, so I expect within a few weeks they should be available on the central market and global servers. That is Black Shrine, the new boss rush mode in a nutshell. The core of the Land of the Morning Light expansion revolves around this new type of content, so I hope I was able to explain everything clearly. But before I leave you, I wanted to go over some details regarding the future of this Black Shrine mode. Newer difficulties will be unlocked over time as the player base defeats the current hardest difficulty available. The developers have already designed and made the harder difficulties. They're just watching clear rates now, so once more of the community clears the higher levels, the more likely they will introduce levels 8 through 10. More light orbs will be introduced when they do so, usually with a requirement of needing to clear the first level of that new difficulty to acquire them. All of these bosses are solo content. You cannot be in a party while doing these. There are plans to introduce group bosses in the future, but we know very little apart from the fact that they are thinking about it, they are working on it. Clear limits per week may change down the road. Right now it's only 5, which does suck. It feels pretty restrictive, especially now that eventually we'll get an additional boss, and there are 7 difficulties now in Korea. Affinity for each boss determines the type of trace and lightstones you get. So if you want a specific trace, you'll want to do those bosses. Moon gives wind lightstones and Trace of Ascension. Fire gives fire lightstones, obviously, and Trace of Battle, and Earth gives earth traces and earth lightstones. That's all I have for you in this guide. Let me know what your thoughts are on the new mode for the Land of the Morning Light expansion. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.